y'all are staying safe from the weather. We continue the biography of Dodrupchen the First and how he got his name, for example. It's because he performed a protection ceremony for the sake of the welfare of Tibet in his time. So in Lhasa, as requested by the government under the personal supervision of Changchu Kempo, Dodrupchen performed ceremonies for many days for the welfare of the government and the country, and for Kudung Kempo himself, who was the supervisor, Changchu Kempo. He had two names. While effectuating a ceremony with just his right hand, Dodrupchen miraculously raised a 2-story high do, D-O with the umlaut, and then threw it. The Tibetan government paid him great respect and gratitude for his protection and prophecy of the country. Let me write that down so y'all know what it is. Look at this. Since that time, Dodrupchen became known by the name, the great adept Mahasiddha of Do Valley, Drupchen. People of Lhasa said there are many adepts, but there is only one great adept. Dodrupchen also brought back Gyalwe Nyoku with him to Kham. The next chapter of this book is his biography, and there's some overlap, but it's also very interesting on its own. On the way, they faced many dangers, but he conquered them all, either by heroic courage or by his spiritual powers. It all only strengthened his inner realization. For example, one day they lost their way in the snow, and Dodrupchen experienced a feeling of sadness. From that sadness arose an amazing vision of Milarepa. Milarepa singing gave him the Neto Ningpo sadhana of Milarepa and merged himself into Dodrupchen. Sometimes that's also required in the visualization, which is very nice to know. In 1793, Dodrupchen was invited by the Dege Palace for the first time. He performed ceremonies and gave teachings accompanied by many mystical signs. From that time, Dodrupchen became one of the main preceptors of Queen Regent Tsewang Lamo and her son, Prince Tsewang Dorje Rigdzing, born 1786 and possibly deceased 1847, of Dege. The Dege court requested him to stay as their preceptor, but Dodrupchen refused, forgoing to Wutaishan in order to spend the rest of his life with his primary goal, although it was never realized. Now Dodrupchen was dedicating his life solely to the propagation of Dharma, so the teachings would reach the hearts of many trainable beings. In his autobiography, Jigme Lingpa expressed his joy on receiving a message about Dodrupchen's success in the propagation of Dharma. Dola, the Lama from Do, meaning Dodrupchen, has given the explanatory teachings of Ningtik in Dege 3 times. On the first occasion, 2,000 disciples received teachings. On the second, 3,000. On the third, 5,000. Many lay people took vows of not hunting, whereby many animals were given the gift of fearlessness. So unfortunately, one raccoon was hit by a car around this area, and Omani Beme home, let us hope it will gain a fortunate rebirth. I feel happy that I have brought about this small result by staying in a remote place and developing bodhicitta. This is the fulfillment of the prophecy that said, the incarnations of Namning, Nyangben, Chokying, and the Divine Prince will open the door of Longchen Ningtik teachings. In the same year, as requested and sponsored by the Queen Regent of Dege, Dodrupchen laid the foundation of Ogmin Rigdzin Pelgye Ling Monastery at Getse To in Sakchuka Valley. But after laying the foundation, he left for Amdo because of his long-standing aspiration to go to Wutaishan. He made a winter-long retreat at Chakar Tredzong, a sacred place in Amdo. In the monastery of Choje Rinpoche in Gome province, Dodrupchen transmitted the Longchen Nyingtik and other teachings to Choje Rinpoche, a celebrated Gelug master who studied Nyingma teachings and had become one of Dodrupchen's disciples. Dodrupchen received some transmissions from Gome Choje also. Dodrupchen gave teachings and served many Tibetan and Mongolian communities of that region. So Amdo is more mixed. It's now known as Qinghai. He displayed many miracles, such as causing a stream to flow out of dry land for a community that was without water. For the Mongols of the Blue Lake region, he became known as Harhan Dalai Lama. Because of the fame of Dodrupchen's enlightened power, old Chonang Tsasak, a powerful Mongol chieftain, invited him to his domain, although Nyingma practice had been prohibited there for the last 2 years. The chieftain had many children, but none of them ever survived, although he took the spiritual protection of the lamas of Kubung Monastery. Dodrupchen blessed him and prophesied that the chieftain would have another child. When that child was born, the baby was so sick, but through Dodrupchen's spiritual protection, the child survived. First, he was named Yamatar, and later his name was changed to a different name. The spiritual power of Dodrupchen caused a new attitude of tolerance in the minds of people toward other lineages of Buddhism in that area. Dodrupchen was also invited by the Mongol king Qingwang Nawang Dorje, also known as Chogyal Naki Wampo. Nawang Dorje was the most important chieftain in the Blue Lake region at that time. Dodrupchen gave the transmission and instructions of Longchen Nyingtik, Khandro Yangtik, and the commentaries of Yonten Tso to between 40 and 100 important people, in addition to the king and queen. Dodrupchen gave the Longchen Nyingtik transmission to Drupchen Toku Jigme Namka Gyaltsen of Gonlaka, who became a Longchen Nyingtik lineage holder. Before 1959, it is known that Gonlaka had more than 1,900 tantric residents. Dodrupchen also taught to Nawang Tendar Larampa of the Alaksha Mongols. Then a problem arose. Okay, this is where the drama happens. So if you don't like drama, you can just skip this video. Dodrupchen involving the Amban, the representative of the Emperor of China at Xining, the capital of the state of Blue Lake, Qinghai. So Qing means blue, Hai means like an ocean or lake. Dodrupchen was summoned to the Amban's camp and accused of belonging to a group of Kampas who were fleeing from their homeland. Dodrupchen was helping them, but he didn't belong to that particular group. Another accusation was that Dodrupchen had been in the Blue Lake region for a few years without informing the Amban, which was true. Further, it was said that he was wearing the hat of a Kempo, a lama, without official recognition, an abbot without official recognition, which was partially true since he hadn't received such recognition from the Gelug school, which was the official religious institution of that particular region. Through interpreters, the Amban questioned Dodrupchen for a whole day amid a huge assembly of Tibetan and Mongolian dignitaries of the Blue Lake region, including King Nawang Dorje Jonang Sasak. All of them, as Dodrupchen describes it, sat as if they were receiving a religious discourse. At the end of the day, not only was Dodrupchen released, but the Amban was so impressed that he even requested him to say prayers for a sick friend of his. The problem was thus miraculously avoided to everybody's surprise. Otherwise, there could have been a real danger to Dodrupchen's life and to the positions of many Mongol princes who were his patrons. Many months later, the Amban sent another message to invite Dodrupchen to Xining. In Xining, with great respect, the Amban said to Dodrupchen, "Usually when people get a letter from the emperor, they stand and listen to it facing east. However, you may remain sitting, but listen carefully and face east." Ceremoniously, he opened the letter from the Emperor Jiajing, which included the following lines. "If the Lama is beneficial to the people, there should be no problem about his being a Lama of the Red Hat Nyingma sect. He, Dodrupchen, must stay in the Blue Lake region. He mustn't leave for Wutaishan, for Lhasa, or for his own home. If he should leave, he must consult the emperor first. The chieftains of the Blue Lake region must pay respect and service to the Lama. The people of that area saw that the emperor's recognition of Dodrupchen as a Lama of the 12 divisions of Mongols of the Blue Lake region was a great honor. They were joyful because their prayers that he would stay with them were granted, but Dodrupchen's dream of going to Wutaishan was shattered. Realizing now that he could not travel towards the Wutaishan against the emperor's edict, Dodrupchen wanted instead to go to central Tibet to see Jigme Lingpa once again, but his devotees persisted in opposing this plan, citing the emperor's order. So Dodrupchen sent Jigme Chotruk in his stead to central Tibet with huge offerings, everything that he possessed. The travelers also took many gifts from King Nawang Dorje for Jigme Lingpa. The Chonang chieftain requested Dodrupchen to build a Gompa monastery and promised all the necessary financial and political support, but Dodrupchen refused to accept the offering, reminding himself of the wise old saying, "Don't stay too close to your patrons." Arik Geshe Chenmo Changpa Gelek Gyaltsen, 1726 to 1803, of Ragya Monastery, a preeminent Gelug scholar, profusely praised Dodrupchen and made generous offerings to him. He also received transmissions from Dodrupchen. An epidemic in Arik Ragya Gompa, the large Gelug monastery in Amdo, killed about half of its 4,000 monk residents. All the survivors fled to a nearby valley except one monk, who chose not to leave, as it would disrupt his saying the prayer of Manjushri Nama Samgiti. One day he heard the sound of bells, and he saw some people with an unusual tiger-like animal entering the abandoned monastery. When one of them came to his house, before he could warn him of the epidemic, the man said, "Dodrupchen is here. He wants to get the message to the monks that there will be no more danger and that they can return. We are disposing of the abandoned bodies." Later, Dodrupchen performed a fire offering ceremony, Homa, and stopped the epidemic, enabling a monastery to survive and revive. He also miraculously drew a stream of water from the rock of Amye Kyumgong, the hill behind the monastery, which is still a healing stream today. I just learned today in Chongqing, China, there was like a controversy involving a stream around a temple and how the developers unfortunately passed away after offending the people of the temple. So be careful if you're dealing with these types of architecture. An uncle of Dodrupchen and others came to the Do Valley in Golok and urged him to return home. Citing emperor's orders, the chieftains and people of the Blue Lake region, who were his devotees, objected to his departure. But Dodrupchen's uncle suddenly got sick and refused to take medicine or go to any monastery for prayers unless Dodrupchen would come back home with him. Thus the chieftains were forced to allow Dodrupchen to return home. He left Lama Pema Tamcho behind as his representative to show that he was not abandoning the area. Dodrupchen returned from the Blue Lake region to Do Valley in 1799. There he resumed building his Doton Luntrup Gompa at Shukchintago in Do Valley. Jigme Gyalwe Nyuku also came to Do Valley to help Dodrupchen build a monastery. Dodrupchen, accompanied by Gyalwe Nyuku and others, visited the king Tsewang Lundrup of Tsikak at the Punsukzong, the king of Chotse, and many in Tsikka Valley to transmit teachings, perform ceremonies, and raise funds for the monastery. Nyingma Dorje, a young nephew of Dodrupchen, who later became the famous Kangdok Terchen, came to see his uncle. Dodrupchen gave him a vajra and a purba and asked him to stand up. Holding them in his hand, Terchen turned around and said, "Home, home, home." At that moment, the memories of Terchen, having been Nyingma Dorje in the past, awakened. Then Dodrupchen conferred him the empowerment of Yumka Dechen Gyalmo, and Terchen heard the sound of the mantra, "Om Padmo Yogini Jana Varahi Hom," come from all the trees, flowers, and vegetation he could see around him. In 1801, on visiting to Mar Valley, Dodrupchen met Do Khyentse, 1800 to 1866, who was then about 1 year old. The child was insisting on his parents to take him to someone named Sonam Choten, adding that otherwise he would be going home, meaning that he would die. Sonam Choden was one of the early names of Dodrupchen, but hardly anybody but he knew it. When Dodrupchen met the child, he tearfully held him and assured him, "I will take care of you." Khyentse wrote years later that when he met Dodrupchen, he saw him not in the form of an ordinary person, but as Guru Rinpoche. At the advice of Dodrupchen, Khyentse was brought to Shukchen Tago and started to receive blessings and teachings. Khyentse kept seeing Dodrupchen in various forms and surrounded by various men and women in mysterious forms. After growing up, he realized that those appearances were not normal forms of the Lama or his surroundings. After a few years' stay, the involvement of the chieftain of Upper Do Valley in shielding a thief was discovered. The incident disappointed Dodrupchen greatly, as he was not only a great Lama, but a wise, ethical, and highly respected tribal leader. Soon he refused to stay at Shukchen Tago, although it remained as a hermitage for many years. Palyul Rinpoche, 1808 to 1887, read the Kanjur there for a long time and memorized many sutras. However, I saw only the ruins of Shukchen Tago when I used to pass by the place as a child. Dodrupchen kept receiving urgent invitations from the king of Dege and Dzogchen Monastery. He went to Gyalrong Monastery, Dzogchen Monastery, and places in Sachuka Valley. He was received with great ceremonial processions at each place. At Dzogchen Monastery, he gave empowerments to the young fourth Dzogchen Rinpoche. When he heard that the Queen Mother regent of Dege was seriously sick, he rushed to Dege Palace. The Queen Mother had just recovered from her sickness. Dodrupchen gave her teachings on Yeshe Lama and other teachings. To the king, he gave empowerments of Hayagriva and Vajrakilaya of Gyuluk. Later, he also transmitted to him the Teher teachings discovered by Dodrupchen himself. Though Khyentse was staying under the care of Dodrupchen and had unofficially been recognized as the Tulku of Jigme Lingpa by Dodrupchen himself, then approval of the recognition by Sakya Gongma and Drikung Tulkus, who were close disciples of Jigme Lingpa, were brought by the representatives from Drikung, who came to bring the Tulku to central Tibet. With elaborate arrangements by the Dege Palace, Do Khyentse was then sent to Drikung, where Jigme Lingpa's son was one of the two heads of the Drikung lineage. In 1806, as an uncle of Dodrupchen was dying, he rushed back to Golok from Dege. But until 1809, he went back and forth a few times between Dege, Dzogchen, and Golok, performing ceremonies and mostly giving transmissions and teachings at many monasteries and other places. With Jigme Gyalwe Nyuku, Dodrupchen built Tsagya Monastery in Sachuka Valley, which later became the main seat of Jigme Gyalwe Nyuku himself and of his famous disciple Palyul Rinpoche. I would like to note here that there was a sectarian resistance against the influence of Nyingma lamas headed by Dodrupchen in the Dege court. However, there is no basis for the assertion that Dodrupchen was imprisoned and then exiled during the revolt in Dege in 1798. In fact, he was not in Dege during this period. He was giving teachings to Tibetans and Mongols. He returned from Amdo to Golok only in 1799 and built Shukchen Tago Gompa. It was only from around 1802 until 1809 that he made frequent visits to Dege, giving teachings to the Queen Mother Regent and the prince who became king in 1806. Dodrupchen made many visits and spent a lot of time in Dege after his return from Amdo, compared with his single visit of many months in 1793. According to the numerous documents, not only did the Queen Mother Regent but also her son, King Sewang Dorje Rigdzing, remain ardent devotees of Dodrupchen. They wrote 9 volumes by Jigme Lingpa on wooden blocks, and also 25 volumes of Nyingma Gyubum, and 10 volumes by Longchen Rabjam. In 1809, Dodrupchen returned to Golok. A prophecy of Rungtong Dechen Lingpa says, an incarnation of the divine prince, the heroic bodhisattva, will appear with teachers and meditators of Dzogchen Ati. He will build 3 monasteries in Upper, Middle, and Lower Ser Valley. In 1810, at the age of 66, he established a meditation center at Yarlung in the Trakchen Gorge of Ser Valley. He named it Pema Ko Tsatsum Kandroling. Later, it became popularly known as Yarlung Pema Ko Monastery. Dodrupchen vowed never to leave it, so he didn't go anywhere, but stayed there for more than the next 10 years of his life. While Dodrupchen was living there, music with no visible source could be heard in Yarlung Pema Ko on almost every 10th and 25th day of the lunar calendar. People believed that the music was played by the assembly of Dakas and Dakinis. On those days when music was heard, people were reminded that this was one of the ceremonial days of the month. At Yarlung Pema Ko, Dodrupchen taught and gave transmissions to a great number of disciples, many of whom became famous masters. Frequently, when Dodrupchen would give the transmission of empowerments and instructions, Chagme Khalsang would give the textual transmission long on his behalf. And that concludes the life of the Dodrupchen reading from this chapter today. He also has he blessed the people with silk ribbons of 5 colors. And when he did that, one of his followers saw Vajrapani in a light adorned the banner. Om Vajrapani Om. This place of my teacher is nothing but the true, unexcelled Pure Land of the Dharmakaya.